Hello, hello, workers and friends. Welcome back to Working Class Revolt. I'm one of your hosts, Dust James, the Marxist Leninist truck driver. Very happy today to be here with my friends, my co-host from Australia, union organizer, brother David Fox. How's it going?
Very good, thank you.
Right on, right on. And so we also have our young friend and co-host of Working Class Revolt, uh, coming live from Scotland, the United Kingdom. Brother William Morrison, how's it going?
Thanks, Dust. It's going well. Hope you guys are all right too.
Right on, brother. So
Very good.
we're trying to get back to our roots. We started out doing this show with me and David Fox, doing
That's right.
a very quick, a very hit the ground running study of William Z. Foster.
Yes.
History of three internationals. And we said that it's the American trucking and Australian Boilermaker,
Yep.
and we're going to bring this study to y'all. And we're almost 2 years after the fact now. It's 2 years after the fact. Working Class Revolt. We're starting to get turned into a Working Class Revolt media collective. We're running chat groups on Facebook, running chat groups on Twitter, Facebook page, broader community, building connections. And I think it's a wonderful, beautiful thing. And we've brought a lot of people together. We went over a lot of material, and we're getting back to something that's very basic to me. We're going to be studying Stalin's dialectical and historical materialism. Yes, and that is out of the history of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Brother David, why don't you go? I see you got a fancy old book there. Why don't you go as
Well, for the viewers
introduction of the
and
piece?
and for the viewers and future viewers as well, this is it first came out in 1939. This is the 1939 version. It's the history of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, Bolsheviks, of course, and the chapter we're reading, or the part we're reading, Dialectical and Historical Materialism, is found in chapter 4. And it was actually, the chapter 4 is titled The Mensheviks and the Bolsheviks in the Period of the Stalin Reaction. The Bolsheviks constitute themselves an independent Marxist party, 1908 to 1912. So it was during that ideological struggle as well, of what type of party it was supposed to be. And obviously, the section we're reading today was written by Joe Stalin, and it has been now. I've actually got a shorter part, so it's actually not a really long book. People when they actually study this in philosophy, there's a lot of long texts, a lot of long books. This was quite straightforward, and it actually comes to show why we're a party of the working class. The leading force is the working class, the most advanced element of it. And we won't be going through the entire book of the history of the CPSU today. Obviously, we're only going through this section, but it is a highly recommended reading. You can find it on Marxist.org, or you can even download it and find it. You can actually still order it. They still print it to this day. And obviously, you've got the much more modern versions there. And I think Dust has got the latest copy that came out in 2011. So this is where we're kicking off today. And I think this is vitally important to study this, to understand dialectical and historical materialism as well, how matter is in constant change, and our relations to the material conditions, and where ideas and that are reflected from, and not the other idea around. It really actually hammers home what's primary, matter or the idea. And I think it's widely it's that point right around. It's not the idea. It's not the idealist version of where the ideas come first. It's the material conditions that determine the consciousness. And this would be I won't spend too long because we really want to get into this, but I would highly recommend everyone to read this. It's a really important work.
Let's see, Comrade William, anything to add to introduce the piece?
Yeah, no, I just want to say I have a massive appreciation for this text. I read it. My first time reading it was during my treatment when I was going through my cancer treatment. I read this in the waiting room to get all my stuff done and stuff on the days I went into hospital. So I don't have the best memories reading this book. So I'm glad I'm going to be refreshing it in my head by doing it with you guys today. It's a lot more positive than my first encounter. But yeah, I mean, this although it's a short pamphlet, I absolutely love it because it goes down to the very root of Western philosophy, is the idealism versus the materialism, and what comes first, what's primary, the concept, the idea, or material reality. And obviously, as Marxists, we argue that it's material reality that molds and shapes society and ideas, and it's actually the material reality that comes first. So I've got a massive appreciation for this text. So yeah, I can't wait to dive into it.
Right, Brother Fox, you have something?
Yeah, and just wanted to comment, when I first was taught this, like, this copy here was produced by my mentor and close comrade, John Bailey. He's in his 80s now and still very healthy, still quite sharp. And we developed this for a national study school for when I was once in the Communist Party of Australia back in 2007. And when reading this and going through all this with that comrade who like through philosophy and that, it was just a big eye opener. I just completely looked at the world completely differently after that. I thought, wow, it was like a curtain unveiling everything. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. Yeah. So compared, because all the idealist crap we've been fed over time, we have a different view. But when this is just the eye opener. This is where the curtain raises on a completely different look on reality.
Right on. Right. I think it's great that we study Stalin. Working class revolt. We don't play around. We don't like entertain the Trotskyites and the Radlibs and the people that like are all say they're obsessed with Marx, but are actually just trying to, not threaten their own position in society. The technocrats and what have you. And we don't care if you're scared of Stalin. You're scared of Stalin's legacy, and you believe the lies against the great man in history who, moved mountains, who took, one of the poorest, backwards countries in all of Europe and inspired the people to build up their country and defeat the Nazis and eventually invent space travel. I mean, if you're against that, we don't want you here. I don't care, because there's enough people. Stalin's name is respected in the third world. Immensely. Communist parties with millions of people with seats in government respect Stalin. And and now this emergence of working class socialism and the imperialist bloc, where we are also going to respect Stalin, and we're going to throw off this petty bourgeois farce that calls itself Marxism. So, and
let's get down to the bare knuckle. Well, no, it's like what I love. Yeah. This is gloves off boxing.
Yeah, last time we studied Stalin, we had Brother Joey Villarreal on, who is a Chicano nationalist. And he was saying how, he's a Maoist, and he puts a lot of emphasis on the lumpen. And he was saying how Stalin was actually involved in, he called them youth survival gangs. Stalin robbed banks before, and then Trotsky was like complaining, oh, he hid under a desk. That motherfucker was hard. Trying to say like you can't mess with it. But anyways, we're gonna actually, and what I love about this, I'm a truck driver. I drive 60 hours a week. He speaks in clean, clear language that's easy to grasp. It doesn't like fluff it up or try to make himself look important. It's in a textbook that's given to, this is 1939 in the Soviet Union. This is, the people, building up their country, people who went from no running water, like nothing, like absolutely nothing, subsistence, agriculture and like feudal conditions, to like being a modern industrial power. People that went through that change in their life are learning this and understanding this. And this is amazing thing. But we're going to get right into it. We're going to start reading it. We're actually going to read the intro and the part 1, and we're going to stop right at part 2, and then we're going to have a discussion. We're going to read a paragraph apiece. I'll start, then Brother Fox, and then Brother William. And here we go. Dialectical and historical materialism. Dialectical materialism is the world outlook of the Marxist-Leninist Party. It is called dialectical materialism because its approach to the phenomenal of nature, its method of studying and apprehending them, is dialectical, while its interpretation of the phenomenon in nature, its conception of these phenomena, its theory, is materialistic.
Historical materialism is the extension of the principles of dialectical materialism to the study of social life, an application of the principles of dialectical materialism to the phenomena of life of society, to the study of society and of its history.
When describing their dialectical method, Marx and Engels usually refer to Hegel as the philosopher who formulated the main features of dialectics. This, however, does not mean that the dialectics of Marx and Engels is identical with the dialectics of Hegel. As a matter of fact, Marx and Engels took from the Hegelian dialectics only its rational kernel, casting aside its Hegelian idealistic shell and developed dialectics further so as to lend in a modern scientific form.
Quote, my dialectical method, says Marx, is fundamentally not only different from the Hegelian, but is its direct opposite to Hegel, the process of thinking which, under the name of the idea, he ever transforms into an independent subject, is the demure creator of real world, and the real world is only the external phenomenon form of the ideal. With me, on the contrary, the ideal is nothing else than the material world reflected by the human mind and translated into forms of thought. Unquote. Karl Marx, Capital, Volume 1.
When describing their materialism, Marx and Engels usually refer to Feuerbach as the philosopher who restored materialism to its rights. This, however, does not mean that the materialism of Marx and Engels is identical with Feuerbach's materialism. As a matter of fact, Marx and Engels took from Feuerbach's materialism its inner kernel and developed it into a scientific philosophical theory of materialism and cast aside its idealistic and religious ethical encumbrances. We know that Feuerbach, although he was fundamentally a materialist, objected to the name materialism. Engels more than once declared that, in spite of the materialist foundation, Feuerbach remained bound by the traditional idealist fetus, and that the real idealism of Feuerbach became evident as soon as we come to his philosophy of religion and ethics. And that's reference Karl Marx Selected Works, Volume 1.
Dialectics comes from the Greek dialego, to discourse, to debate. In ancient times, dialectics was the art of arriving at the truth by disclosing the contradictions in the argument of an opponent and overcoming these contradictions. There were philosophers in ancient times who believed that the discourse of contradictions, the disclosure of contradictions in thought, and the clash of opposite opinions was the best method of arriving at the truth. This dialectical method of thought, later extended to the phenomena of nature, developed into the dialectical method of apprehending nature, which regards the phenomena of nature as being in constant movement and undergoing constant change, and the development of nature as the result of the development of the contradictions in nature, as the result of the interaction of opposed forces in nature.
It is essence. Dialectics is the direct opposite of metaphysics. 1. The principal features of the Marxist dialectical method are as follows. A. Contrary to metaphysics, dialectics does not regard nature as an accidental algomeriton of things, a phenomenon unconnected with, isolated from, and independent of each other, but as connected and integral whole in which things phenomenon are organically connected with, dependent on, and determined by each other.
The dialectical method, therefore, holds that no phenomenon in nature can be understood if taken by itself. isolated from surrounding phenomena. Inasmuch as any phenomenon in any realm of nature may become meaningless to us if it is not considered in connection with the surrounding conditions, but divorced from them, and that vice versa. Any phenomenon can be understood and explained if considered in its inseparable connection with surrounding phenomena, as one conditioned by surrounding phenomena.
B. Nature is a state of continuous motion and change. Contrary to metaphysics, dialectics hold that nature is not a state of rest and immobility, stagnation and immutability, but a state of continuous movement and change, of continuous renewal and development, where something is always arising and developing, and something always disintegrating and dying away.
The dialectical method therefore requires that phenomena should be considered not only from the standpoint of their interconnection and interdependence, but also from the standpoint of their movement, their change, their development, their coming into being and going out of being.
The dialectical method regards as important primarily not that which is at the given moment seems to be durable and yet is already beginning to die away, but that which is arising and developing. Keep that in mind, even though at the given moment it may appear to be not durable. For the dialectical method considers invincible only that which is rising and developing. Do you want me to just read that quote? Oh. Or you
William,
want? You go.
William, go ahead.
I can go, yeah.
Yeah,
All
go.
nature, says Engels, from the smallest thing to the biggest, from grains of sand to suns, from preocysta, the primary living cells, to man, has its existence in eternal coming into being and going out of, into coming into being and going out of being, in a ceaseless flux, in unresting motion and change.
Therefore, dialectics, Engels says, takes things and their particular images essentially in their interconnection, in their concatenation, in their movement, and their rise and disappearance.
C. Contrary to metaphysics, dialectics does not regard the process of development as a simple process of growth, where quantitative changes do not lead to qualitative changes, but as the development which passes from insignificant and imperceptible quantitative changes to open fundamental changes to qualitative changes. A development in which the qualitative change occurs not gradually, but rapidly and abruptly, taking the form of a leap from one state to another. They occur not accidentally, but as the natural result of an accumulation of imperceptible and gradual quantitative changes.
The dialectical method, therefore, holds that the process of development should be understood not as a movement in a circle, not as a simple repetition of what has already occurred, but as an onward and upward movement, as a transition from an old qualitative state to a new qualitative state, as a development from the simple to the complex, from the lowest to the higher.
Nature, says Engels, is the test of dialectics, and it must be said for modern natural science that it has furnished extremely rich and daily increasing materials for this test, and has thus proved that in the last analysis, nature's process is dialectical and not metaphysical. That is, does not move an internally uniform and constantly repeated circle, but passes through a real history. Here, prime mention should be made of Darwin, who dealt a severe blow to the metaphysical conception of nature by proving that the organic world of today, plants and animals, and consistently man too, is all a product of process of development that has been in progress for millions of years. Frederick Engels, Anti Düring.
Describing dialectical development as a transition from quantitative changes to qualitative changes, Engels says, in physics, every change is a passing of quantity into quality as a result of a quantitative change of some form of movement, either inherent in a body or imparted to it. For example, the temperature of water has at first no effect on its liquid state, but as the temperature of liquid water rises or falls, a moment arises when this state of cohesion changes and the water is converted in one case into steam and the other into ice. A definite minimum current is required to make a platinum wire glow. Every metal has its melting temperature. Every liquid has a definite freezing point and boiling point at a given pressure. As far as we are able, with the means at our disposal to attain the required temperatures. Finally, every gas has its critical point at which, by proper pressure and cooling, it can be converted into a liquid state. What are known as the constants of physics (brackets, the point at which one state passes into another) are in the most cases nothing but designations of the nodal points at which a quantitative change, increases or decrease of movement, causes a qualitative change in the state of the given body, and at which consequently quantity is transformed into quality. Dialectics of nature.
Passing to chemistry, Engels continues. Chemistry may be called the science of the qualitative changes which take place in bodies as the effect of changes in quantitative composition. His was already known to Hegel. Take oxygen. If the molecule contains 3 atoms instead of the customary 2, we get ozone, a body definitively distinct in odour and reaction from ordinary oxygen. And what shall we say of the different propositions in which oxygen combines with nitrogen or sulphur, and each of which produces a body qualitatively different from all the other bodies?
Finally, criticizing Düring, who scolded Hegel for all he was worth, but surreptitiously borrowed from him the well-known thesis that the transition from the insentient world to the sentient world, from the kingdom in inorganic matter to the kingdom of organic life, is a leap to a new state. Engels says,
This is precisely the Hegelian nodal line of measure relations, in which, at certain definite nodal points, the purely quantitative increase or decrease gives rise to a qualitative leap. For example, in the case of water which is heated or cooled, where boiling point and freezing point are the nodes at which, under the normal pressure, the leap to a new aggregate state takes place, and where consequently quantity is transformed into quality. Engels from Andy Doran.
D. Contradictions inherent in nature. Contrary to metaphysics, dialectics holds that internal contradictions are inherent in all things and phenomena of nature, for they all have their negative and positive sides, a past and a future, something dying away and something developing, and that the struggle between these opposites, the struggle between the old and the new, between that which is dying away and that which is being born, between that which is disappearing and that which is developing, constitutes the internal content of the process of development, the internal content of the transformation of quantitative changes into qualitative changes.
the dialectical method therefore holds that the process of development from the lower to the higher takes place not as a harmonious unfolding of phenomenon, but as disclosure of the contradictions inherent in things, and phenomena is a struggle of opposite tendencies which operate on the basis of these contradictions.
In its proper meaning, Lenin says, dialectics is the study of contradiction within the very essence of things, from Lenin Philosophical Notebooks, Russian edition. And further, development is the struggle of opposites, Lenin Selected Works, volume 11. Such, in brief, are the principal features of the Marxist dialectical method.
It is easy to understand how immensely important is the extension of the principles of the dialectical method to the study of social life and the history of society, and how immensely important is the application of these principles to the history of society and to the practical activities of the party of the proletariat.
If there are no isolated phenomena in the world, if all phenomena are interconnected and interdependent, then it's clear that every social system and every social movement in history must be evaluated not from the standpoint of eternal justice or some other preconceived idea, as it is not infrequently done by historians, but from the standpoint of the conditions in which gave rise to that system or that social movement and with which they are connected.
The slave system would be senseless, stupid and unnatural under modern conditions, But under the conditions of a disintegrating primitive communal system, the slave system is quite understandable and a natural phenomenon, since it represents an advance on the primitive communal system.
The demand for a bourgeois democratic republic when Tsardom and bourgeois society existed, as, let us say, in Russia in 1905, was a quite understandable, proper, and revolutionary demand. For at that time, a bourgeois republic would have meant a step forward. But now, under the conditions of the USSR, the demand for a bourgeois democratic republic would be a senseless and counter-revolutionary demand. For a bourgeois republic would be a retrograde step compared with the Soviet Republic.
Everything depends on the contradictions, time, and place. It is clear that without such a historical approach to social phenomenon, the existence and development of the science of history is impossible, for only such an approach saves the science of history from becoming a jumble of accidents and of agglomeration of most absurd mistakes.
Further, if the world is in a state of constant movement and development, if the dying away of the old and the upgrowth of the new is a law of development, then it is clear that there can be no immutable social systems, no eternal principles of private property and exploitation, no eternal ideas of the subjugation of the peasant to the landlord, of the worker to the capitalist.
Hence, the capitalist system can be replaced by the socialist system, just as at one time the feudal system was replaced by the capitalist system.
Hence, we must not base our orientation on the strata of society which are no longer developing, even though their present can constitute the predominant force, but on those strata which are developing and have future before them, even though that at present do not constitute the predominant force.
And just before I comment on, just before I read that, that's keep that, all the viewers and future viewers, keep that paragraph in mind. In the 80s of the past century, in the period of the struggle between the Marxists and the Narodniks, the proletariat in Russia constituted an insignificant minority of the population, whereas the individual peasants constituted the vast majority of the population. But the proletariat was developing as a class, whereas the peasantry as a class was disintegrating. And just because the proletariat was developing, and just because the proletariat was developing as a class, the Marxists based their orientation on the proletariat, and they were not mistaken. For, as we know, the proletariat subsequently grew from an insignificant force into a first-rate historical and political force.
Hence, in order not to err in policy, one must look forward, not backwards. Further, if the passing of slow quantitative changes into rapid and abrupt qualitative changes is a law of development, then it is clear that revolutions made by oppressed classes are a quite natural and inevitable phenomenon.
Hence, the transition from capitalism to socialism and the liberation of the working class from the yoke of capitalism cannot be effected by slow changes, by reforms, but only a qualitative change of the capitalist system by revolution.
Hence, in order not to err in policy, one must be a revolutionary, not a reformist. Further, if development proceeds by way of the disclosure of internal contradictions, by way of collisions between opposite forces on the basis of these contradictions, and so as to overcome these contradictions, then it is clear that the class struggle of the proletariat is a quite natural and inevitable phenomenon.
Hence, we must not cover up the contradictions of the capitalist system, but disclose and unravel them. We must not try to check the class struggle, but carry it to its conclusion.
Hence, in order not to err in policy, one must pursue an uncompromising proletarian class policy, not a reformist policy or harmony of interests to the proletariat and the bourgeois, not a compromiser's policy of the growing of capitalism and socialism. Such is the Marxist dialectical method when applied to social life, to the history of society.
As to Marx, philosophical materialism, it is fundamentally the direct opposite of philosophical idealism. 2. The principal
Right.
features of Marxist philosophical materialism are as follows.
Hey, is that the end of chapter 1 there, William, or is it further?
Yeah, that's it done.
So that's where we're going to end it tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
As far as our reading, we're
All
going to
right.
start back on mine. It's 121. I don't know what it is. If anyone has the 2011 U.S. reprint, it's page 121. But we're going to stop on chapter 1 there. And there's a lot to go over, and it's a lot of good stuff. Go ahead and get. I know.
Well,
Right here, I want to go ahead and say this. The line I just read about not being reformist, a lot of like Maoists like to use this to attack China but if you look at here, the difference between was a quantitative and qualitative change. And if you look at China, there is a qualitative change because the Communist Party, which has 95 million members, has real control over the government in China, which has real power over the economy, and which is showing real different material results in comparison to the capitalist bloc. So, initial responses to the piece. Go ahead, Brother Fox.
well, I've got a lot of time to study this again, and in the future, I'll be still rereading this into the future. It's a brilliant little piece of work, which is still quite applicable to today. And I'm looking at what current conditions here in Australia, and I wanted to emphasise a few things through this. And I went on about the importance of the working class in a minute, but it just completely shows that how we got to this point is we've never been. Well, how can I say? The system we're under now, basically capitalism, when people say, oh, socialism doesn't work or whatever, et cetera, we'll understand it does work. And actually, we've got clear histories, examples why. But as soon as you have revolution, it's consistently under attack by those opposing forces. 2, we've never lived under capitalism for ever since human. Oh, sorry, I'll repeat that. We've only lived under capitalism for the last few hundred years. Prior to that, we had different social systems where before then we've had communal, slave, feudal, and now capitalism. And even capitalism in its earliest form, that was still ever growing as well. Now it's its highest level, imperialism. So the economic conditions, the material life of our society didn't just get here overnight. It hasn't always been like this. It actually became, for all these consistent changes from going to a lower level to a higher level, and this work just clearly shows this is what happens. The other thing I want to point out too, A does not equal A. And also, if you might be able to apply something to a particular conditions of one country, why not work in another country? It depends on the level of development and the material conditions and economic social conditions at the time. And I think one of the big mistakes in many years ago, and people had to learn this, they tried to apply the one-size-fits-all model to everything. Soviet Union was a classic example. I mean, the early years of the Communist Party here, they did some unbelievably great stuff. But the thing is, for their time, they didn't know, and I mean, I'm not entirely blaming them, but they clearly show they didn't have a correct understanding of certain material conditions, and they tried to apply the Soviet model, one-size-fits-all, then we shall do it here, and didn't get anywhere with it. And why? Because our material conditions at the time were completely different from what it was in Russia. Capitalism was still developing, even right in the early 20th century. It was still developing further and further. So that needed to be seriously looked at there as well. And I think that's what's important now. We've got to have a look at now, the concrete reality of now that's facing everyone today. Not being idealist and dreaming, this is what I think should happen. We should actually have that dialogue, and this is where it's at, and move forward.
See, Comrade William, initial responses to the piece.
Yeah, I absolutely loved reading this. Brought back a lot of memories, but I absolutely loved it. One thing I love about this piece of literature, about Stalin and about communists in general, is that the main thing we're trying to do here is just, especially in this text, is just we're trying to find out why things are the way they are, not just politically, but just naturally. Like, why are things the way they are? And they use pretty basic, objective, scientific analysis to explain that. It's like, yeah, I mean, the slave system was horrible, and horrible things happened under the slave system. But here's why it happened. It was an advance from the past. And then obviously, feudalism was a horrible system. It didn't work. 9/10 of the population were living in serfdom, and it was horrible. But it was an improvement from the slave society, and here's why it happened. It's just like this natural kind of dialectical progression of humanity and civilization. And, we're not saying it's good or bad. We're not saying any of that. We're not showing support to a certain thing. We're not opposing a certain thing. We're just scientifically using the dialectical and historical materialism as a tool to analyze the world. We're trying to find out why things are the way they are and what the cause of those things are, and obviously the connections and dependence on things are to each other. And that's really it. Communists aren't dogmatic people, or we shouldn't be. We're scientists. We are trying to understand the world, just like all philosophers have in the past. All philosophers. That's the job of philosophy, to find out what the hell is going on in the universe that we live in. And I think Marxists, using this as a tool to analyze the world in a very specific way, paint the most clear, the most adequate picture that I've seen so far. I mean, obviously, I'm a very young person. I've only studied a handful of the main philosophies, but based on the works I've read from a multitude of different kind of philosophies, this is the one that more accurately underpins kind of what's really going on. And yeah, so I have absolutely, such a big appreciation for this text. It's an eye-opener. If you're not political at all, like you're just getting into Marxism, Leninism, and you read this, like you'll be blown away. Like it'll blow your fucking mind. Like it's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, this piece right here, it hits right to the core of the issue. It gets why we think what we think, and and what that means for us organizing. I was talking about it early. Stalin gets right into it. Stalin's like, nah, it ain't about reformism. It ain't about, there has to be a revolution. To move history. There has to be a qualitative change to move history forward, which means a new class has to be in power. So, I mean, Stalin was right up front with it, just like I was right up front with, we don't want no middle class trots here, stinking it up with their egotism and all that. And that's what you see a lot in these social and Western leftist countries. You see, well, I'm the real socialist, and we're the real party, and we're the true inheritors of socialism, and you will never understand what we understand, and you only understand if you get in line behind us. Well, I'm a truck driver from rural North Carolina, and I'm reading Stalin, and I understand him, and I can apply this to my situation better than you can.
Yep.
And that's just how it is. The masses don't need you. The masses make history. Yep. And this right here, the brother Stalin put it right in the words that he could teach the former peasants in the Soviet Union, and it's up to us now to be training people in this understanding in all the hoods and hollers across America and throughout the world. And it's really amazing. And it's really inspiring because, it might sound like it's some boring philosophy stuff, but think about what he's saying here. He's saying, basically, everything is in motion. Everything is in changing. And the people in power, the capitalists, they want to tell us that capitalism is the best system that ever existed. Oh, and look at all that horrible stuff that happened in the Soviet Union. And look at all that horrible stuff that happened in China. Well, they're lying to you. They're lying to you to keep you subservient and to keep us in our conditions. And I have good news to tell the workers across the world and the oppressed people. Things can change and things get better, and things have. And it's up for us to do it. And what it means that things are constantly in motion. What it means that things that are will not always be is that we can and fight for a better future and win that future.
Exactly. And I think it's why that's why we have to look at this through a proper dialectical method, our genuine concrete conditions around it. We just didn't arrive at this just out of thin blue air. It just didn't. Things don't suddenly just appear. Maybe in a children's storybook such as Lord of the Rings or the Chronicles of Narnia, but that everyday concrete reality, it just doesn't suddenly happen like that. There's always a lead up to everything, and that constitutes that change. Now, actually, interesting point. Like I want to just give you a classic example. it's Sunday morning here, our time here in Australia. The fact is, for those who are a little bit confused about this, is this Sunday morning here the same as the previous Sunday morning last week? I know what I was exactly doing last week because we didn't have a show. I was sleeping in. But no, it's not. Completely different. It's Sunday, yeah, but it's completely different from the previous Sundays. And it's like the same thing where, what was I? It's now the 14th of August now. Well, I mean, it's completely different from what I was doing on the 14th of August last year. Everything's in a that just shows you one thing. Everything's in a different change. Mail actually correctly pointed out you don't step in the same river twice. Everything's in constant change. And what's around it, even look at a simple rock or a stone, that's still in constant change. It's either deteriorating, withering away, or it's been or being processed, one of the two. Everything is in constant change. Nothing's static. Nothing's permanent.
Comrade William?
Yeah, and because of that, because A does not equal A, because everything is a constant flux, that sometimes means that tactics and strategies have to change within the communist parties too. What might be a correct party policy now might not have been 5 months ago, 5 years ago, might not be in the next 5 months, in the next 5 years. That's why China is a very good example of kind of the dialectical historical method working. You can't change the system, but you can change the policies. And they understand that because they're scientists. They're following the science of Marxism. So yeah, because you can't step in the same river twice, and because A does not equal A, and because everything is constantly changing, then I mean, yeah, that sometimes means that when a communist party is organizing, we have to change and alter tactics. We don't stick to a dogma. We're not, we have party lines, but those party lines can change and have changed. The Communist Party of the Soviet Union under Stalin, homosexuality was criminalized. But nowadays, the Communist Party, most communist parties in the world, now have legalized homosexuality. You're allowed you're allowed gay marriage and stuff. That doesn't mean that it was wrong then. It just meant that the material conditions then made that more, logical. So yeah, I mean, what was right or wrong 50, 60 years ago isn't what's right and wrong now. Things change. Things have changed. And because of that, and because we're Marxists who have a scientific understanding of the world, we understand that we can still defend Stalin, we can still defend the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, even though they had kind of maybe backward social views. But, we can still defend him for what he did. Like Dust said at the start of this live stream, he took an agrarian, dystopian, czarist country and electrified it and industrialized it. What that man did in a couple of decades in the Soviet Union was just completely it sounded utopian. If it's like some sort of sci-fi novel, what he did. It was unbelievable. It was like you can't even fathom the achievements of the Soviet Union under Stalin. So I mean, yeah, he had some bad things, he had some good things. We all do. But Marxists don't look at it like that's wrong and that's right. It's just like, well, yeah, that happened. Here's why, and here's why it's different. Like I said in my previous point when I did my first remarks, Marxists don't really care about like what's right and wrong. Even Stalin said that in this chapter. Social movements aren't about like eternal justice or morals, because morals change over time. The morals that people were fighting for hundreds of years ago are going to be different morals than we're fighting for now. Social justice and stuff like this, these are just kind of idealistic ideas. They change all the time. They're impossible to keep up with. And, like I keep saying, just because they were right or wrong a couple 100 years ago or even 50 years ago, doesn't mean that's the same. A does not equal A, and everything is constantly changing. And right. All Marxists should understand that.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I think I could... what you just said there, you kind of opened a can of worms, and I had a thought, but I'm going to have to respond to what you're saying right now. And I think you got something going on there. If you look at the woke trend, cancel. I'm a scientific socialist. I'm on the left. I just said wokeism is a problem, I know that's going to be weird for some folks out there going to attack me or whatever, but it is. And the reason why it is because wokeism is not scientific. Wokeism says that this is this and this is that, and if you don't like that, then you're sexist, racist, transphobic. If you don't live up to those morals. But in reality, the reality is that we're looking for quantitative and qualitative changes. We're looking for a new system. We're looking where a place where the economic conditions can be improved, then the superstructure can be improved. And I think what the imperialists do is they try to latch on to our very own social issues that I'm not discounting. These are very real problems. They latch on to the superstructure of our own fights, twist it, manipulate it to rebrand themselves and to cancel their opponents.
Yeah.
And what we're saying is working class Marxists, aligned with the oppressed world, is we're saying we want to work with the people damaged as they are, and build power so we can change the material base.
Yeah. Oops, he's frozen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just adding on to that while he comes back on, and I think that's really important.
Okay.
It's gone for you.
I
You froze there, mate.
let me finish my statement. So,
Okay.
we want to take the working class to take power, work together, do what they can, as flawed as they are, so they can change the material base, and then the masses of people themselves can improve on the social issues on their own terms. All right, go ahead, brother Fox. Go ahead. My bad.
Yeah, I don't add it. Yeah, and that's exactly right. It's the material conditions that need to change, and that's what we're trying to. Besides, we're trying to advocate for a higher level of more advanced product. Yeah, a more advanced mode of production. That's socialism, and then onwards eventually communism as well. Remember, socialism is only a transition too, and so we have to going back. Well, we have, what we're having a look at is where everything's at. I mean, look, that's what I wanted to do. In this chapter, we've just been talking about reforms being reformist or revolutionary, right? There are some reforms we'd naturally support. Yeah, of course we would. It advances workers, helps workers out, working people out. Sure, we would support that. But look, giving everything a complete makeover, making capitalism, imperialism with a smiley face. Well, basically, an old saying is you can put you can sugarcoat a turd, but it's still a turd. It's just the fact is, it's not going to change anything at all. It's not going to improve people's lives and improve the conditions of everyone's life. If we're going to be generally serious about improving, advancing people forward, then the material conditions, we have to look at the material conditions and how we advance forward and how we're going to improve the lives of everyone and give that, which means the material conditions improve, then they've got the opportunity to advance further. That's why that's revolution's imperative. When we've got to keep that in mind, not just think, coming on with their own views and distorted views and what people think, and someone said the wrong thing. It doesn't matter what people say, right? It's the end result that's most important. And materialism is not what you say; it's what you do. And that's what vitally important. It's what you do. And I've asked some people out there. They're here. They stand for this. They stand for that. They're with these people and that. And obviously, I could see right through them. And I just asked them a simple question: what do you do? That's going to be the question. They look at me. I don't know. The question is, what do you do? And actually, I look through it, and then through them, and it just exposes them there. But they're a crock of shit, basically. They stand for nothing. And they're just idealistic, and they think, and they've got this whole distorted view. Even what socialism is, what does it mean? Oh, it means it's government owned. No, wrong. Yeah, they got this whole complete distorted view, and this work here brings everything back to concrete reality. This is what we need to look at, and we can see then what we can do to work with others to change things, how it's changed. And I want to focus on this because I know a lot of people get thrown off by all these other issues out there. They might be important, but they actually reflect and they're aiming for the wrong people. I love it. Stalin's reinforced this, and I'm going to throw it out there. I'm going to read this again, and these two paragraphs are vitally important to keep in everyone's mind. Hence, we must not base our orientation on the strata of society which are no longer developing. That's the petty bourgeois and the bourgeois, even though they at present constitute the predominant force, but on those strata which are developing and have a future before them, the common working or ordinary working people, the common people, even though they at present do not constitute the predominant force. All right? In the 80s of the past century, that's the 1880s, in the period of the struggle between the Marxists and the Narodniks, the proletariat in Russia, that's the working class in Russia, constituted an insignificant minority of the population, whereas the individual peasants constituted the vast majority of the population. But the proletariat was developing as a class, whereas the peasantry as a class was disintegrating. And just because the proletariat was developing as a class, the Marxists based their orientation on the proletariat. That's the working class, common working people. They were not mistaken, for as we know, the working class subsequently grew from an insignificant force into a first-rate historical and political force. That's where and for us, that clearly outlines where we need to go get our focus back on. I'm glad actually we have a collective like this working class revolt, because that's what we want to refer to. And yes, there are other oppressed nationalities up there, like the First Nation, Indigenous people, minorities, and they constitute a part of that broader mass of the working people, and that's why we focus on that. So that's why. So I wanted to throw it out there just to make sure everyone clearly understands that bit. It was drummed into me long ago, and I'll tell you why I actually said it. Sorry to take up a bit of time. But a comrade, Vic Williams, who passed away back in 2010, I think it was, and he's in his 90s. He joined the Communist Party in the 1930s, so it was that link to the past. And he asked myself and a comrade once when we first joined the Communist Party, I'm not a member there, but he asked, well, why is the working class the leading force? And we sort of stood there stumped for a minute. Oh, what was it? And he goes, right. Well, you know why I say I've hung on for so long and doing these things, because you need to know this properly. And he actually quoted from this as well. And that's why we need to keep that focus. We can get distracted very easily. We can get that. But we've got to understand that's the class that's coming into being. They're the ones who are going to be the leading class.
Let's see. We're getting near the end. I know William's jumping to speak. David took some time there.
Sorry.
I wanted to give a shout out to folks joining us. Thank you, Brother Gordon Fiala, for joining us. Thank you for your contributions, along with Brother Todd, our Dotry friend of the working class revolt community, and also support the Starbucks workers. Any worker that wins a victory is a victory for all workers, and building power for our class and stepping stone towards that quantitative change, which is the socialist revolution. But I want to thank everybody for joining us. We're about an hour in. I got one more point to make, and then we'll go through a round of conclusions and call it a night. Brother William, anything to respond or to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank David for rereading those couple paragraphs. I think it's something that all Marxists, disciplined and principled Marxists, should stick in mind, that our main focus should be centralized around the ascending class, and the ascending class is still the proletariat, the global proletariat, the working class all over the world. That's still the class that we need to focus on. It's the duty of all Marxists to do that, so I really appreciate you reading that. And this literature makes me kind of optimistic about the whole woke toxic left that we have to deal with nowadays, because even this book would say don't really pay that much attention to them. They're going to wither away. They're so decadent. They're so retrograde. History is going to wash them away naturally. It's natural. It's inevitable. They're going to wither away just by themselves. Just leave them alone. Leave them alone to just disintegrate into their own decadence, and it'll be fine. It'll be absolutely fine. They're going absolutely nowhere. This is just a trend. It's hysteria. It's gone absolutely crazy. but I'm fairly optimistic, and I refer to, quotes and paragraphs from, dialectical and Marxist literature that they will just wither away. Just ignore them. Don't engage with this woke cancel culture, mob. Just don't engage. Ignore them. They'll wither away by themselves in their own decadence. It's natural. So that's kind of it. Stop caring about them.
Right on, brother. I think I wanted to make one last point before we go in our round of conclusions, and that is on the point of one system overtaking another one. There's always something, dying, and there's always something coming into being. And in that period, it's like it's never one thing or the other. I mean, if you look back at historically and you look at um, you go back to a certain time, you can see how it's been a 180 shift. But there was never like an exact moment where this began and that stopped. There's always something forming, and there's always something dying. And when we look at this, this helps us understand how the ultras and the purists, those who latch on to kind of the Christian Puritan Western philosophy, well, if you don't have this, this, and this, it's not socialism. Or if you don't have this, this, and this, I don't want to identify with that because my politics is about my identity and feeling better than everybody else and not actually improving conditions. We try to reject that. Something is constantly emerging, something is dying, history is moving forward. And there are, that watershed moment. There is that qualitative change where one class takes power from the other. But just because you had the revolution, and just because that one class took power, that doesn't mean you're going to eliminate everything negative about capitalism instantly. So this gets into why do these Western leftists that are more concerned about their own identity, why they reject the great efforts of the workers and the collectives in the global South, of China, of Vietnam, of Nicaragua, of Venezuela, real fighters, black and brown people, poor people, putting their lives on the line to build collectives and fight against the U.S. imperialist state to improve their countries and improve their lives. People really building socialism, and why we should respect them and not disrespect them and reject them because they don't fit our pure idea of what socialism is. And you can look at this. Why is it that China needed U.S. investment? Why is it that China has to operate in the global system that is still predominantly controlled by the imperialists, by the monopoly capitalists? They have to even though the working class is in power, and they have the Communist Party, and I can say it for Vietnam, and I can say it the democratic systems being developed in Venezuela are unprecedented. I mean, they wrote their own constitution. I mean, the communal groups that control over the communities. It's amazing. It's revolutionary. It's inspiring. The reason why they can't just be like push that communism button and have communism develop is they're dealing with the dying imperialist system.
Oh, it's dropped out there again.
They're still going to have to react to those conditions and build policies that build socialism as the imperialist system falls, and then we can make what policies are necessary to build socialism as imperialism falls. It's moving. It's dialectic. It's understanding, and it doesn't care what your identity is. What you want to identify with. It's real, concrete reality that real people are living, are on the line, on the front lines of the global class struggle, life or death situations, people not being fed or people being fed kind of decisions that got to be made that are building socialism. I know I said a lot there. That will be like the final. Let's get reactions of that, Brother Fox.
Well, just on a comment. I think we're pretty much all on the same song page here, and I think there's no disagreement. I think we've got to keep focused. And you're right, William. people can get obviously caught up in these endless arguments, be it on having Twitter dramas or Facebook dramas or any other type of social media drama. That's not where the fight is anyway. And you're right. We should just let it go. Let's just keep focused on what we have to do, and that's vitally important. I noticed there was a little comment too, just on that from Gordon about unions are losing ground. Look, yes and no. Things come in ebbs and flows as well. And I think when we look at that, I mean, some unions are advancing. Amazon labour unions are a very big classic example. That RMT in the UK. We even got the rail union here in New South Wales, the next state up in a state there, is making advances there, and same with many other places as well. So yes and no. And also too, when we're talking about when Marx talked about combining, it's not just unions. It could be a collective of some form, could be a cooperative, anything to actually start organising ourselves to fight back. So that's. I'll give you a classic example. The truck drivers there in California are going to be growling, the blockading ports and all that. Now, there was a bit of controversy around that, but why didn't those owner-drivers combine and form a collective? Because individually they're up against the mercies of the mercy of imperialism. But if they're combined collectively, they're actually they can do something even further to advance their case as well. Even if a factory closed down, or shuts down, and an employer goes, right, I'm going to move this offshore. The workers have got every right to occupy it and take it over and run it. That where we're involved in this, it's where we need to show. Well, we need to actually now demonstrate with them and show them the problems of capitalism, imperialism, and how within the confines we can no longer advance it. We need to actually go to a higher economic model, and that's socialism.
Thank you, Brother Fox. We're over the hour. Let's do a round of conclusions. Brother William, if you have anything to add or any responses, do that, and then followed by your conclusion.
Yeah, I just wanted to say first of all that I certainly don't agree that the union power is losing traction. I don't know if Gordon was referring to a specific country, but it's certainly not the case in Britain. The RMT have just carried out their third wave of strikes just last week. There's bin workers, like garbage bin workers, on strike right now for the same demands as the RMT. There's police. The police in Edinburgh right now are on strike because of the Fringe, the whole Fringe festival in Edinburgh. The police have went on strike because they are sick and tired of having to put up with the stresses of I
just want to interject. Brother Gordon Fiala is a U.S. comrade, and our unions have been ripped apart to shreds for decades. And what we're seeing now with the Amazon is just the start of it. What I respond to Brother Fiala is, if you look back when workers did have power and they were scared of us and they were giving us concessions, I mean, that was the 1940s. And we had a communist party with hundreds of thousands of members that were in unions that were led by, that represented millions of people. So if we want to threaten the government, we're going to have to build working class power, and we're going to have to rebuild the union movement. We're going to have to rebuild community groups to be able to challenge their system. Because there ain't, it ain't going to be like 10 people. A revolution isn't fucking 10 motherfuckers with a gun taking over the fucking Capitol. It's masses of people that are creating a real power to go up against the system. Sorry I interrupted you there, but go ahead with responding that in your final statement, brother William.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, obviously, the communist and workers' movement is nothing like it was in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and 70s, especially in Britain. Everywhere in the Western world, we've lost since there. But, I mean, in the age of the increasing intensification of neoliberalism and the warring polities right now in regards to international relations, we are growing a lot. There's strikes happening in Australia, in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Norway, and in Britain. So I mean, there's strikes happening all over the place, and they should all be supported in their demands. But yeah, I mean, obviously, compared to where we were in the 60s and 70s, I mean, it's almost like you're not even able to compare it. But yeah, pretty much my closing statement is just that this book is a must-read for all Marxist-Leninists. It's a fantastic, not even for Marxist-Leninists, just people who are interested in philosophy in general. This is a pillar of materialist literature. So even if you're like at university or something and you're studying philosophy or something, and you have to learn about different kind of philosophies, this one for sure. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. It's a pillar of materialism, and even the theory of Marx itself is a synthesis from parts of Hegel and parts of Feuerbach. Even that itself is a synthesis of the dialectical method. It just shows that the dialectical method is everywhere. And like I said about international relations, there's a handful of academic kind of fields of study that I'm into. International relations, political philosophy, geopolitics, and in all of those very different fields of academic study, the natural laws of Marxism can be universally applied in all those fields. They just have different names. Like in international relations, we talk about different institutions, but really the institutions is like the first world and the third world. It's like the colonized and the imperial powers. And going into those field of thoughts with a Marxist kind of lens and worldview is really, really helpful to just kind of see through the bullshit and just see through all of the layers of complication and all these different names and shit that the different academic fields give. Like if you read Marxism and then you go into those fields of study, it's so much easier. You see the world so much differently, but like it's just, it makes things a lot easier. So I recommend you do it. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this piece of literature and many other Marxist literatures just kind of prove that materialism, material reality is primary. Thought and ideas don't change the world. It's the material reality, the material conditions of society that make people have the ideas that they have, and then that leads on to revolution. But it's material reality first, and Comrade Stalin, and many other leading revolutionary and successful Marxist-Leninists in history and today have proved that with the Soviet Union and China and every single actual existing socialist state and even the anti-imperialist states that are not even socialistic. They're still fighting against US-led hegemonic, unipolar hegemony, and they should all be supported, and they should all be 100% backed by Marxist-Leninists alike.
Oops.
Let's see. Comrade Fox, concluding remarks.
Yeah. Look, I think in order to change the world, I mean, more than just understand it, this helps you. This is a guide. This is not a dogma. This is not, I'll get the word now. It's just gone straight out of me. Yeah, but it's not a dogma. This is a guide to action as well. Like a toolbox to be used, a box of tools to be used every day in common struggle. And this is a highly recommended read for everyone. To develop a study group, possibly if you know other people around. There might not be a party organisation around. Well, maybe like-minded people do it online. Do it. Don't have to go live. You could just do it for a Zoom meeting or something. But you can, and study this material. It's really easily understood and it's fantastic. But I tell you what, it is an eye opener as well. And it actually reminds us all to actually get back on track. Get focused. There's a lot of work to be done. And what would also to what to actually be. Quote Lenin, what is to be done, basically, and what we need to do within our immediate community moving forward, and that's just something that's vitally important. I mean, look, I'm in an advantage where I do talk to workers every day, on one form or the other. But maybe some of yous are not, but it's still there's a way you can actually go out. You can actually engage with the community. Maybe canvass your local town or local city, maybe with a few questions, with some facts and figures about the material life, the economic situation, just get their views and opinions as well. It's a great way to engage and develop discussion and a dialogue with people about moving forward. Just simple things like that. And this But this work is a highly recommended read. And look, in your own time, it's on Marxist.org. It's also on the CPGBML's YouTube channel, Proletarian TV. There's been excellent talks about that as well. Actually, if you want to, I think it's www.thecommunist.org, I think it is. That they've got a lot of talks on this. Excellent stuff from both Harpo Bra, Ella Rule, and also many other comrades involved in that. And it's straight down, it's bare knuckles, working class stuff. And I like to actually quote what Vic Williams did say to me once too. When Stalin wrote this is solid stuff made by a solid person. It is solid stuff. And you can try and argue against it, but those who argue against it always find themselves up the dead end of a philosophical cul-de-sac.
Hey, brother, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for commenting. If anybody, a shout out to brother Chris, Canadian comrade. He got the symbols for Working Class Revolt on his bio, on the YouTube, a knife and a book, because work and study. He is a butcher. Thank you for joining us. And someday, man, get on that, brother. We're glad we're inspiring you, but you could do this, man. Read it on your own. Read it with your neighbors. And Chris, if you want to come on here, and anybody else wants to come on here, we want you to come on and study. Come on, open invitation to whoever wants to come and study the next section of Stalin, Dialectical Materialism. Come on with us, study. You can reach out to me, workingclassrevolt@gmail.com. Hit me up on Facebook, Dust James, or Twitter @DustJames90. Get involved in the show. Come on our show. Got an idea for a show? Hit it to me, and we'll have you come on. I think the takeaway from this piece is what is doesn't always have to be. Though the meek shall inherit the earth, from some of my religious tradition. We have been not, but we shall be all. Some of the early English lyrics of the Internationale. Things better we're gonna make. So let's do our ending chant. Everybody raise their fists. Repeat after me. Dare to struggle.
Dare to struggle.
Dare to win.
Dare to win.
All power to the people.
All power to the people.
Right on. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.